Welcome to Changing Tracks. This week we have a new passenger aboard our train to talk to us about her conversion story. Sister Megan, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how old you are?
I'm 28 years old, born in May, the month of Mary. I'm the youngest of 6. My parents, they live in Virginia now, but because my dad was military, we moved around a lot. And I was born in Hawaii, and then they finally moved to Virginia at the very end, and my dad retired there. So I guess I always say I'm from Virginia. Some people like to say that I'm from Hawaii.
Sounds cooler.
Yeah, it sounds cooler.
And is your family Catholic? Did you grow up in a Catholic environment?
My family has always been Catholic. Well, my dad wasn't. He converted, but my mom was always Catholic. And since they have gotten married, they got married in the Catholic Church. They've always been Catholic in their relationship together. And you know, one of the normal, like, cradle Catholics, you're born into a Catholic family, you go to Mass your whole life. I went to Catholic school. My parents always made sure that we had a Catholic education growing up too. And so I went to school. In Hawaii, I went to school with a religious sister. And then when we moved to Virginia, I went to an elementary school with the Nashville Dominicans, and I learned about the faith with them. And then I went to a high school that didn't have religious, but it was Catholic. And then I went off to college to a Catholic university.
After that, you went to college. You said you went to a Catholic college.
All my friends, we all kind of just dispersed in different colleges. Nobody went to the same one. And I ended up going to a Catholic university in Baltimore, Maryland. And I went there. I had the idea in my mind. I wanted to, be in the CIA. So I went to study international relations.
What made you want to be in the CIA?
Too many movies. That's what made me want to be in the CIA. I've seen too many movies. I thought it looked fun. So I wanted to pursue that, so I went up to Baltimore, Maryland, and I started studying there. That's when I think everything started just falling apart.
Stopped going to Mass, started hanging out with bad friends, just getting into the whole party scene.
Yeah. And
then when did that come to an end? When did the Lord change your tracks?
Well, like I said, I went there. I started playing soccer. And I got onto the soccer team at that university. And kind of with that, I kind of got in with the sports life. When you start playing sports in college, it can bring on like a whole different atmosphere that you never even thought you were going to be in, It was very, like, the idea was like, yeah, I mean, after a game, we're going to go out to the parties, we're going to have a party, whatever. And at first I said, no, I didn't want to do that, because I knew I was like, no, I just want to stay with my faith. Like, I really tried. Like I said, 12th grade, I had some better friends, and they started talking to me about God. We went to Steubenville conference, and that was all good. But so I went away to college, and I was like, no, I'm going to try it. I have to be good, But I was by myself. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, it was just, even though it was Catholic by name, I don't even know if I had any Catholic friends there. And so I tried to stay away from that for a time, but I started feeling lonely, because I was like, man, all these people go off after the games, and here I am by myself, And on top of that, it was this whole idea that if you don't go to the parties after the games, if we lose later, it's your fault because you didn't create team unity because you didn't go to the party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Team pressure.
Yeah, team pressure. Forget about peer pressure. It was team pressure. I don't know. It was terrible. Anyway, so I started thinking, well, like, I have to start going with these people to these parties, because I didn't want to be like the one left out. So I started going, and it was just like, from there it was a disaster. Like, I went in very strong with ideas, but little by little, as I started, I never got into that stuff. But as I started making small steps towards sin, like drinking, right, going out with my friends and stuff like that, little by little I started saying, well, that other stuff's not that bad. I don't do it, but if the other people want to do it. It was like a slow relativism that started creeping into my life. And I just remember thinking, like, what's going on with me? There's this, like, grotto in the woods of the school at the university where I would go to that was dedicated to our Blessed Mother. And a lot of people would go down there to, like, I don't know, do drugs or whatever like that. It's sad, but that's the kind of university it was. It was Catholic by name, but like I said before, I think I would go to Mass on Sundays there, and I think it was like me and like 3 other people. Literally, it's not like an exaggeration. There was very few people there. They always had to ask me to read because there was nobody else there, So And people would go there a lot to, do whatever, drugs or whatever, and then they would leave. So I went down there one night, and I remember just crying before the statue of our Blessed Mother, just being like, what am I doing? Like, what have I gotten into? Because even though I was going out to the parties and I was having a good time and I had a ton of friends, like, they would always be like, yeah, and they would always take me out. They'd pay for everything, and we'd have a great time together. But I felt so empty inside. I would go home at night and just think about, like, what's going on with my life, and thinking about how far away I had fallen. Like, what am I going to do next? And then this one night I got a grace from God to go to that statue of our Blessed Mother and just, like, start crying, just be like, what's going on with my life? And I asked her, I said, fix it, just fix it, Because, like I said, I had so many people, so many friends, and they're all, like, always asking, like, come on, let's go do this, do that. And it was like, I was so busy, because some people say, the busier you are, like, the less trouble you'll get in, better to be busy so you don't get into trouble. But sometimes you can be so busy and you fill your life with so much stuff, and it's not a good, you're doing so many things and you don't have time to listen to the voice of God. So I was playing soccer, and then I had an accident. We were playing a soccer game one time, and I went to do a head. I played defense, and I went to head the ball, and I got hit with some other girl's head. And she knocked me that way, and then the goalie went to get the ball, so I got hit in between her head and by the goalie. And so I sprained my neck and I got a concussion. And so, like, in that moment, it was like soccer was over. It was like dun dun dun. Okay? So there I am, soccer's over. For me, I couldn't play anymore because I had gotten injured. And, I was still part of the team. So I would still go to the games and everything like that, but sit on the bench and cheer them on and everything. And while everybody would be at practice, I had to go and, like, work out in the weight room, do what I could do, just in case if I did get better, I could start playing again, And it would be times, and it was like, okay, everybody else is playing together, and you have to go over to the weight room and just, like, be on the treadmill or whatever. And I just remember during that time, being away from that group of people, it was like a time of silence. And I remember feeling like so, I don't know, I don't want to say I, like, heard the voice of God or anything, because I didn't in that time, but I knew that I couldn't have silence. I was like, if I'm silent for 1 second, I know something's, like, God's gonna tell me that something's, not right. So I always had music playing in my ears. I'd always be having something going on so that I could never, like, stop and hear the voice of God. Because it's almost like if I knew inside that he was gonna tell me what you're doing, like, where are you going, what are you doing,
And you would have had to change.
And I would have had to change, yeah, and I didn't want to change, But then, so, like, I was always with music constantly. I could never always have my headphones, I'm working. I couldn't be, like, without that. But like I said, like, the times when I would start, having some silence, like maybe after the parties when I come home at night and be in my bed or whatever, I started to think about things. It's just like, this is terrible. And then that night where I went to the grotto, and I was there before Our Lady, and I was just like, fix what's going on in my life. And for me, I just remember thinking, like, one night I came back from a party and I was just sitting in my bed and I was like, man, what's going on, Like, everything my parents gave me in 18 years of my life, I'm about to lose in 1 year. And I started realizing I have to get out of this situation. And I was like, but why is it like that? It doesn't make sense, They gave me the Catholic faith. I grew up with the Dominicans. Like, I went to a Catholic school my whole life. Like, why is, like, Catholic schoolgirl going bad? And I started realizing that it's because even though I had that faith and I went to church and I, learned everything in religion class, I never had a personal relationship with God. Never once, my parents would take us to Mass early so we could pray, but I wasn't really praying. I was just, like, thinking of, counting the lights that were on the ceiling or whatever, or looking at the flowers and, like, oh my gosh, those are dead. When are they going to change those, on the altar? Instead of, like, really praying. And the fact that I never took time to make a personal relationship with Christ, and, I mean, the Lord knows my parents tried so hard. They would always take us to confession every month. They would take us to Mass, like I said. And they would do these good things, Stations of the Cross on Fridays and stuff like that. But to help us. But if it's not something that you choose to do, because your parents can only help you so far. People can only help you so far, but you have to take that step for yourself. And I had never taken it. And because I never did anything to strengthen my relationship with God, I think that's why in that 1 year I almost lost everything.
Do you think it's a step you didn't take because out of ignorance, or was it a step you didn't take because you just never wanted to give your life over to the Lord, or were you even aware?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say ignorance because, I mean, I received so much, about the saints and everything, when I was young. It's just, maybe I just didn't feel like I knew how. You know, I'm not exactly sure why it never happened, because I mean, I always learned about the saints. I mean, my parents always took me to that thing. My mom always told me to pray, but it was one of those things that maybe because I didn't have anybody guiding me, like somebody to tell me how to pray, you know?
Yeah.
Then that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And so I never had that, so I didn't really spend time in that. And I think that's what really, even if it would have been 10 minutes, you know, starting off 10 minutes in high school to pray before the Blessed Sacrament, you know, to talk to God, to form a relationship with him, I'm convinced that would have saved me a lot from what had happened that 1 year in college.
So that night, like at the grotto, that was obviously a grace from God. Did Our Lady answer your prayers and help you out? And
yeah, actually, okay, I had a friend from high school who was, he wasn't very happy with his university either, you know, and so he started telling me, he was like, yeah, let's think about a different school, you know, where we can go, because he wanted that we go together so that, you know, to the same university, so we would have like, you know, start off at a university with a mutual friend, you know. So I decided I wanted to transfer schools. My parents knew that there was something wrong. They wanted me to get out of there too. Like, even though I was still, you know, I was playing sports and I, you know, got good grades, because my grades were fine, they could tell something was wrong with me. Because you know how parents, I think they can always tell, you know, they know us very well. And they could tell that that something there wasn't going right. So they encouraged me to leave, so I transferred schools. And
at this new school, did you have a big change in your life, or did you get back into sports? And
right. Well, this new school that I went to, it was Catholic, you know, it was Catholic as well. And so I kind of went there, and I just continued with the same lifestyle of parties. There wasn't sports, so I didn't get into that, but I just kept on going, you know, out with my friends and whatever, to the beach, you know, at night to, you know, just drink or whatever. And there was no initial change at first, but I was happy because I was like, you know what, here, this is a great place. Why? Because it's Catholic and there's other Catholics here. So what I could probably do is continue with my same lifestyle, you know, going out, drinking, hanging out with my friends, and at the same time not lose my faith. And I was like, and everybody's happy, you know, like I keep my faith, my parents are happy, you know, God's gonna be happy, and I keep on having fun. But
nice theory.
Yes, nice theory, right? But it wasn't like that. I started, you know, just like I said, stayed with the same friends, and I didn't really have an idea of changing at all. I had some really good roommates who were Catholic, and they just, they were really Catholic. They were into the faith. They would get up in the morning, go to Mass, daily Mass, and things like that. While I would be coming in from hanging out with my friends, they would be getting ready to go to Mass. I'm like, why are you going to Mass? You know, it's a weekday. Why are you going to Mass? Yeah. You know, I mean, I would go on Sundays. I'm like, why are you going to Mass? It's a weekday. And they're like, why don't you go to Mass? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, for me, it was weird that they would go on a weekday. Why would you do that, you know? Yeah, so I just kept up with the same life, right? Lifestyle. But I would go to theology class, and there was this guy that always sat at my side, right? And he was like, I thought he was a hippie at first. He had like long hair, he had a mustache and a beard, and he never wore shoes. But he was just a really good guy. He was really nice. And one day he turns to me, he's like, hey, do you want to consecrate your life to Mary? And I mean, how are you going to say no to that? I mean, he put it in such a way where it's like, if you say no, it's like, oh my gosh, why wouldn't you want to do it? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, wouldn't you just love to consecrate your life to Mary? And you say, no, not really. And you sound like the worst person in the world. Yeah. Like, you know, like who wouldn't want to consecrate their life
to
the
That's the holy peer pressure.
Right. Before we had team peer pressure, now we have holy peer pressure. So he tells me, he's like, don't you want to consecrate your life to Mary? And I was like, well, I mean, I've never thought about this before. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Thinking, you know, maybe he's gonna like, you know, get off my back, get off my case. And he's like, great, okay, sign here, you know, we're gonna start the consecration on this day. And what he was talking about, what he was referring to, was the 33-day preparation for the true consecration to Mary by, you know, St. Louis de Montfort. And I had no idea what he was talking about at first. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, oh, well, it's really easy. You just say these prayers every day for 33 days. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? You know, because I thought if I just said, yeah, it sounds great, he would leave me alone. But no, he was like, there, okay. And he was like, yeah, we're going to start. And he told me when we're going to start and everything like that. And I was like, oh man. And I knew, I was like, man, this is one of those guys that if I don't show up, he's going to notice. And he's going to, because he sat next to me every day in theology class. So I knew he was going to be like, come on, why were you there? Blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, let me do this. So I started doing the 33-day consecration. Like I said, but I had no idea what I was doing, you know? I mean, I did grow up with the Dominicans, and I had a lot of, you know, theology behind me. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. But, like, by that time, I had gotten so much sin and so many bad things that I was doing this consecration, but I didn't really know what... I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just doing it with my mouth and my words and nothing else. Not with my heart. And one day, I was doing it, and I was reading the prayers, and it was the first week, and it talked about, you know, how you have to fight against yourself, you know, the flesh, the devil, the world. And I was like, what is this saying? And it's like, if it became very clear to me, like, that's what you have to fight against. And I understood, like, that's what I had to be doing. I don't have to be living what I'm living. And it said, and I was like, ooh. And I was doing this right before I was going out with my friends, you know? It would be like every night, my little routine. Study, do this little prayer, and then go and hang out with my friends and do stupid things, you know? And go to the parties and drink. So I was just like, oh. And it kind of started something in me. I was like, man. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And just like a week later, one of the friends I would always go to hang out with, I found her, like, you know, crying. And I was like, what are you crying about? And she's like, I just went to confession. And I was like, okay. And she was like, I think I have a vocation. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it didn't make sense to me. I was like, what's a vocation? Because I had Dominicans and I had sisters growing up, but I mean, I didn't know that, you know, they weren't born like that, you know? I always thought, or maybe they came down from heaven, I don't know, woo, okay. Like, no, it was like, she felt like this girl that I always hung out with, she felt like she was going to be a sister. Like, she had a calling, you know, to give her life to God, and I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And she's like, I went to confession, you know, and I've realized I've been living a lot of sin, and, you know, now that I'm clean of my sin, I feel like, you know, God's calling me. And I was like, what? Like, it didn't make sense to me at all. And so she was like, yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, I don't know what you have to do now, because I had no idea how vocation goes. And she was like, I want to go talk to some sisters. And the sisters she had met were the servant sisters. And I was like, okay, well, and she was like, will you come with me? And I said, no. And she was like, come on. And I was like, no, I'm not going to see the sisters or whatever. And she was like, please. So I went with her, you know. And it was when so I went with her that night to meet the sisters because she thought she had a vocation. Now that girl now, like, what, she's married and she has like 2 children, I don't know. Like, she got married later and she found out she didn't have a religious vocation. But I did. So, I just remember between what I had read in the consecration and then this, like, all of a sudden meeting some sisters. It's not like all of a sudden I was going to be like, oh, I'm going to be a sister, you know? But through the servant sisters, I met the Home of the Mother youth.
So what's the Home of the Mother youth? Just to explain that to people who don't know. Is it a youth group? Is it like a parish group? Is it?
Right. Okay, no, it's a movement inside the church, right? Okay, so there's different movements. There's Opus Dei, there's Regnum Christi. Well, the Home of the Mother is another movement inside the church, right? And inside the Home of the Mother, there's the servant sisters, the servant brothers and priests, and then there's the families and the youth.
Okay.
So it's like a youth group, but it's not proper to one. It's not exclusive to a parish.
Okay.
You know, it's a movement. And so I met the servant sisters of the Home of the Mother who told me that they had a youth group, and I was like, that's great. I was like, but you don't know who I am. I can't be, you know, I felt like I couldn't, from everything I had done and how close I was to, like, you know, to losing, I mean, just doing so many bad things. I was like, I don't think you want me to be part of your youth group. I mean, they told me about it. I don't know if they told me about it, you know, thinking like, yeah, you could be part of it. But they just said, you know, we have this youth group, the Home of the Mother Youth, and we have these meetings if you want to start coming. And they started saying, you know, and I was like, well, what do you have meetings about? And they're like, well, we just, you know, we get together and we talk about things about God. And I was like, why would I want to do that? But I was just so surprised at first that they would even talk to me, because, you know, I just was like, you're holy people. You can't associate with me, you know, like, yeah, you know, I didn't see it happening. And I was just very surprised. So maybe that whole initiative of them, you know, because like I said, my friend, she wanted to go see them. And when we went to go see them, like, I started talking to them and they started telling me about this group. And I was like, well, why would you want to talk about things about God? And they're like, well, you know, to help you grow in your spiritual life. And so I decided to go. And when I went, and it was always, they talked about like how God loves us, why God loves us, you know, that we have to strive for holiness, that we have to be saints. And it sounded great, but I had already heard this stuff when I was younger. So finally I put my question, I was like, that sounds great, I was like, and I've heard all that when I was younger, but how am I supposed to do that? Yeah, you really think I could be a saint? You think that's possible? Do you know everything I've done in my life? And it was kind of from there. It was taking everything I had learned from when I was younger, all those things from my parents, from the Dominicans, from the Catholic Church, and it was finally when I met the Home of the Mother Youth that it started making it more concrete. Well, this is how you do it. Like I said before, I never had that relationship with God because I didn't know how to have it. But it was like when I met the Home of the Mother Youth, it started giving me, here's concrete things that you should do. Start having a prayer life. Start going to Mass. Start going to confession, right? Like, pray the rosary. Start talking, to Our Lady, to God. Start making that relationship that I said I didn't have before, and that caused me so many problems. And they gave me concrete ways to do it, Mm-hmm. Mass, rosary, confession, spiritual reading. Fill your life not with bad things, but with good things. Don't waste your time in the things that are going to take you to hell, but raise it up trying to strive to get to heaven. And so it was through that I started, and I was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to try. Because it was what I desired the whole time. Everything that I learned when I was younger, I loved it. My parents always gave me like the religious stuff, that talked about God, Mary, Jesus. The Dominicans did it. I loved that stuff. It was very good for me. But because I never made it a relationship, I never made it concrete, well, it all fell away. But it was finally in this time that it was like, come on, time to walk, time to do it. Time to go on the path of everything you had heard before, make it reality. And so and I started doing that, and I started becoming more involved with the Home of the Mother Youth. And then later I actually entered into the Home of the Mother Youth to start this, this way to holiness.
So then from the Home of the Mother Youth, later you saw you had a vocation with the sisters, and...
Yeah, that was a little bit harder. I started making radical changes, and my friends didn't know what was going on. And I even changed friends. I got a different group of friends, and we had decided since the Home of the Mother Youth started in Spain, we wanted to come to Spain, and we wanted to stay with the sisters, because some of the girls, they thought they had a vocation and everything. And I had thought about it too. So, we were just invited to come here, stay a summer, work, do good things, get to see Spain, get to see where the home started and everything. So we came, and we had a great time that summer. It was really good. It was nice to see where everything started. And then I went back to school. And when I went back, I did feel a call from God, and I knew it. And when I went back, I started fighting against it a lot. And so now, everything I had learned to give up, all those, like the bad, friends I had, the party scenes, well, in a way to fight against the calling that God had given me, I started getting back into that stuff, At first, it wasn't a fight. First, I thought, oh, you know what? Because I felt called. I was like, well, maybe I'm not called to be religious. Maybe I'm called to evangelize my old friends. And I was like, that is a great idea, I had to go back and be, the conversion for all the sinners. I'm going to convert everybody that I used to hang out with. And that was a terrible idea. And I know that if I had told my spiritual director my plan of going back and converting all my friends, all the party people, she would have been like, that's a terrible idea. But because I decided not to tell that little fact to my spiritual director, well, I started going out with my friends again, trying to convert them, and that lasted like a day before I just fell into a lot of bad things again. And from there, I started trying to fight against the voice of God. And I started it was kind of even, I felt worse about it, because before maybe I was ignorant about what I was doing, and I didn't think it was so bad. But now I knew it was bad, and I knew I had a calling from God. So I was just like rejecting what he wanted to do with me, with all these bad things. And so I just got really bad. And like, I started, just causing problems, being rebellious and things like that. And I just became, while I was doing that, trying to fight against the voice of God, I started feeling really burnt out. And I was like, man, I'm so burnt out. Like, why am I fighting? Because you can't fight God. You lose.
You can try, but you lose.
Yeah, you can try, but you lose. So I started feeling really, really burnt out. And I remember my parents were like, we think you should go back. Summer started coming around again, and they were like, we think you should go back to Spain. And I was like, why? And they're like, we think you need it, because you're really happy when you came back from there, and you need it. And I was like, okay, well, and I had decided, like, okay, I'll go back to Spain to see, like, I understood that I'm going back to Spain, and either I answer the call that God has given me, or I have to leave the Home of the Mother Youth. I just felt like I was giving it a bad name, because I knew I wasn't living the commitments. People knew me as a member of it, but I was doing terrible things. So I felt like I have to, I either enter and I follow my vocation, or I have to leave it completely, because I don't want to give it a bad name. And so so I went back to Spain, and I did, a week long of silent spiritual exercises of prayer, and it was there that I felt, respond to your vocation. And I told our Blessed Mother, if you want me to respond to the vocation, you have to do it all, because I'm too coward to do it. I mean, I'm so brave to do stupid things and be rebellious, but to answer the call of God, I'm a coward to do it. And that day that I made that prayer is when I entered into the Servant Sisters. The fact that I met the Home of the Mother when I did the consecration to Our Lady, and then the way my vocation came about through that prayer that I made to Our Lady. I mean, my whole life, I just give it all to her. She's the one who's going to guide it and everything. Because without her, I'm nothing. I've already seen what I can do, and it's terrible things. But with her, if I let her guide me, then it will be fine. But I've given my whole life to her. She takes care of it from there.
Thank you, Sister Megan, for sharing your story with us. I think just like Sister Megan says, a lot of times, especially when you're going through those first college years, it's like you just have to escape, and sometimes you just want to, create a name for yourself and fit in. And I think one thing that Sister Megan said that's so true is always having music and music and music, because as soon as that silence comes, the Lord might talk to you, and sometimes that means you have to change the way you're living. But it's funny that we don't want to change because we're all so miserable about it, but I love how Sister Megan's story, Our Lady just completely took her by the hand from that night she was crying to then to doing this total consecration, then to coming to Spain and to entering in the sisters. And so I think that the key point here is to stay close to Our Lady, as close as you can, and to pray to her and to give your life to her, and she'll definitely help you out and take you wherever it is that she wants to go. So
definitely, she's you go with Our Lady, she'll take you. She's the quickest way up to Jesus. It's the most, for sure, quickest way to Jesus. It's the best thing you can do.
It's true.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.